Welcome to episode 19 of Power Podcast. Last time you tricked me with that. This time, fool me once.
I was prepared. Fool me twice, can't get fooled again.
Yeah, I instantly just forgot the thing, just like George Bush.
All right, George Bush.
Fool me, can't get fooled again.
So on episode 19, we're talking about low back pain. We're your hosts, Christopher, Gobbs, CJ, and also
Special
Paul.
guest,
Yes.
Dr. Paul Endris. Doctor.
So today's a very special podcast about low back pain, targeting low back pain. Let's start off with probably some of the causes that lead to low back pain, because low back pain tends to be one of the highest, what would you call it?
Most common.
Yeah, most common
Injuries
to have.
Just don't work out. If you just don't work out, you won't get low back pain. So
Don't
you're all right.
don't be alive. Low
Don't
back
work
pain.
out, don't sit.
Yeah. Don't stand.
anything.
Don't run. Don't jump. Don't squat. It can be good if you don't do any of those
Just
things.
be a really bad human.
Just
Yeah.
just lay down.
If you lay on your stomach with a pillow under your hips, you'll be good the whole time now.
All you do is breathe.
You know.
Oxygen's bad for you.
What causes low back pain?
There's like
What can cause it?
zillion things.
I think
Yes.
anything.
How about
things.
What's the most common cause for it in CrossFit? Is that what you're asking?
In CrossFit.
how about this? What's
Cast outside.
a couple causes, a couple things that can lead to low back pain, about technique when you're doing various lifting type exercises?
The easiest thing to point out there is rounding of the back, right? Not getting the back set before you're doing a lift. Say you're doing deadlifts, which is my nemesis, or you're pulling a clean from the ground and you never set your back, never set your core. So then your low back rounds, and then you got a whole host of problems from there.
Just being in a bad position.
Yeah.
Just being in bad positions.
Usually, let's take deadlifts for example. I've had a few friends actually hurt their lower back with a deadlift. Relatively not a whole lot of weight, but when you look at their form, seems pretty much okay. What would you say would be one of the things that might cause it if you have perfect form when it comes to lower back? Is there any other muscle tightnesses that could possibly lead to that?
Oh, this is all you, brother.
Oh, for sure. And here's one of the things that I find very common in people is that we have this tendency to be oversensitive about our low back, where it's like this inherent weak structure in our body. And so let's say you do a bunch of deadlifts and your low back is sore the next day. That's okay. It can be sore. Like if you did a bunch of bicep curls, your bicep is going to be sore. But if you did a bunch of deadlifts, like you probably are going to have some tightness and some soreness in your low back, and that's all right. Is when we get into like the pinchiness, or if it's sketchy. And part of the problem when we talk about pain is it pain or is it soreness, tightness, achiness, and being able to qualify and quantify pain. Gobbs is rolling away.
I'll take one of those too.
So I think that's, there's this, like I said, there's this, everyone's so worried about their low back, like what happens if I stress my low back, and like, it's not this inherently weak structure, like you can back squat 200, 300, 400 pounds, you can deadlift 200, 300, 400 pounds, like your back and your spine is strong. Let's not be so hesitant about it. It's important to be in good position and always talk about technique and being in a good place and a good position, but let's not be so scared.
Got some visitors.
And you guys go.
Oh, you get that? Good.
Oh, good box.
Oh, okay.
And so when we talk about like causes of low back pain, I think it's important to like really come up with a good diagnosis of low back pain. And obviously, like there's a whole bunch of things like internal organs. Like you can have a kidney problem that can refer low back pain. You can have uterine cysts that refer low back pain. But if we're talking about more like mechanical type stuff,
Use me as an example here.
we can use CJ as an example, because really when we're talking about like what structure is causing your low back pain, is it muscle, is it joint, or is it just being in a dumb position? For example, if I fall asleep on my arm in this crazy odd position, like your arm's gonna hurt. The fix for that is just get out of that stupid position. Is that a problem?
What is wrong with you, man?
Swallowed wrong.
I'm sorry.
Right, so I think there's value in having a proper diagnosis of like what actually is going on, because so often I kind of hinted in when we were doing those screenings over there is like people will say, yeah, my hamstrings are tight, and I'll be like, are they tight? What? Why do you think like everyone? If you take your fingers and pull them back, you're gonna say my forearm's tight. But does that actually mean I've lost a range of motion in that tissue? Not necessarily, right? And so it's good to have a good diagnosis and evaluation. This is why it's tough, and like there's really good information out there about different issues like knee pain, low back pain, all sorts of different stuff. But if we don't have a proper diagnosis, then we're really just kind of guessing, playing a guessing game. And it's tough for like the average person to go out there like, how much rotation do you need out of your hip? Well, you need 70 degrees of external rotation. Well, like, what the heck is that? Yeah. But then people will say, oh, my hip is tight. Is your hip tight? Well, if you have less than 70 degrees, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. But if you don't, then maybe you have a core stability problem. Or a lot of times, like if you're doing a lot of loading, for example, if you're a runner and you get low back pain at 2 miles into your workout, but that's the only time that ever bothers you, what's the cause of that? Is it more of a stability issue where your form tends to start to break down at mile 2? It has nothing to do with your hamstring being tight. It has nothing to do with your quad being tight. It has nothing to do with a loss of range of motion in your hip. It has everything to do with you start lacking stability at the 2 mile mark. Mm-hmm.
Well, so going into that, so how would somebody, let's say we're talking about a runner here, how would a runner who always has that problem at the 2 mile mark, how would they go about correcting that or adding more stability at the 2 mile mark? What will they do to fix that?
Well, and this is why it's really good to have a really good coach who's educated on a bunch of different things. And this is one of the things I often tell people is that like, if you're having problems at a certain, like every time I hit 2 miles, I get knee pain. Every time I hit 2 miles, I get X, whatever it is, doesn't matter. It probably has to do with something. If we don't have a blatant loss of range of motion somewhere in an ankle or a knee or a hip, it probably has to do a lot with stability. You're just getting tired at that point, and all of a sudden your form changes. And then you can start running intervals, focusing on form, or trying to work at that mileage and staying in a good position. Because like I said with the arm example, like if I'm sleeping on my arm, just get out of that position, make a better choice. Yeah, so like a lot of times intervals is a good place. Okay. Awesome having a good coach to like look at your form, because you can never unbiasedly come outside of yourself and look at yourself and see. Like Tiger Woods has a swing coach, arguably the best golfer in the game. At one point,
yeah,
arguably.
Yes.
But I mean, Tiger Woods has a swing coach. You look at any elite athlete, they all have coaches.
Yeah.
So we have that. I'm looking at the different.
I have a question.
What?
So, are we going to treat ourselves differently? Like, is there such a thing as like chronic back pain that just probably won't go away for the rest of your life? You just have to learn to manage.
Do people experience that in their daily lives? Yes, for sure.
Okay. So, is there a difference between the way we would treat that and an injury?
Mm-hmm. Correct. And so there's also a limitation of matter. So let's say I've got a guy who's got a bone-on-bone knee, and like he has no cartilage, he's got no meniscus, he's torn his ACL, whatever have you. There's a limitation of matter there because we have an injury of some degree. And then your activities should change. Absolutely. And so and knowing your limitations there. And it's kind of, because it's going to be different for everyone. Like, so like, right now I can think of a guy who has a bone-on-bone knee, but the guy can squat 400 pounds. Now, is that probably a good idea? Probably not. But he can still do it, and he still loves to do it. And so this is kind of the thing, is that when you look at activity and exercise and why we're doing what we're doing, we always make the best choices for health and longevity.
Not always, no. I'm probably a...
Right, but
I gotta keep pointing to myself.
And this is the thing. I wrote an interesting blog on this, is because because I'm training for CrossFit, and we're training for the Open, and 3 days before the first workout comes out, I get pneumonia, and unequivocally, doing the Open was a poor decision for my health, but I did it anyway, because that's what we do.
Yeah. We're CrossFit.
But I mean, you see that across the board with any athlete. It's like you
Powerlifting
you see
and all
with
that stuff,
powerlifting,
yeah.
you see with marathon running, you see it. And the important thing to distinguish here is that with every activity you have, there's going to be inherent weakness to that activity. So, for example, like my marathon runners tend to have tight hamstrings because they never take their hip to a full range of motion. But their aerobic capacity is flipping fantastic. They also tend to lose strength.
So they don't need it for what they're doing, right?
Exactly. But that's kind of because we become so polarized where we get really good at aerobic ability, but we have no ability to pick up a barbell or to pick up a laundry basket. I was working with this, he was in the Xterra, I think is a endurance race, but it's like
It's at least a Nissan car. So.
yeah, right, exactly. But he was a pretty elite guy, and and he was having this chronic hamstring issue. And I told him to go to the gym and see how much he could deadlift. And the guy couldn't pull off the ground 100 pounds. Not because it was painful, but because he just couldn't do it. I'm like, well, there's your hamstring problem, man. You have no ability to contract the sucker.
Yeah.
But I mean, this guy has like he can run a 5K in 16 minutes or whatever he can do. And so we tend to become really polarized. Same thing with like football players, for example. They tend to be really powerful, really explosive, but then they tend to lose range of motion in their hips. They tend to have concussion problems.
That's true.
They tend to blow out knees.
You can't prove concussion.
Yeah, right. Same thing with like baseball players. Like we tend to have rotator cuff problems. Basketball players, knees, ankles.
Yeah.
CrossFitters, shoulders, hips. Powerlifters tend to lose range of motion everywhere. And so, then yoga, for example, tends they have great ability to get, they tend to be able to get in all the positions, they have range of motion everywhere, but they tend to have the inability to be strong.
Yeah, they're like
And
strength.
so and here's the thing, this is what I love about CrossFit, is because we preach all three. So when we talk about your physical ability, what do you need? The three, really physical ability. We need some sort of aerobic ability. Like you should be able to run a 5K, you should be able to swim, you should be able to bike a certain, like long duration, 20, 30, 40, 50 minutes. Some sort of aerobic ability. Then the other one is strength. Like you should be able to push, pull, squat, lift.
Yep.
So there's pretty much 7 different strength parameters you need. And then the third is full range of motion of your joints. And so if you look at your fitness regimen, in there, what are you missing?
Range of motion.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so typically that's kind of where we run into problems. Powerlifters, range of motion, yoga, strength, endurance athletes, strength and range of motion.
Usually, like I was reading some different blogs about mobility, and they were talking about how well mobility is to actually target. So you should be focusing on mobility just as hard as you are on your strength building program.
It's just not sexy, man. It's not
Yeah.
sexy. That's the hard part. It's not sexy.
100%.
You can't do it for time. It's difficult,
true.
right? It's one of those things that I keep pointing to myself here. I'm a narcissist. You don't focus on mobility until it becomes a problem. Becomes an issue, and then you fix the issue, and then you quit doing it. Most CrossFitters are notorious of this. It's like, oh, my back hurts.
people are notorious
And-
of this.
yeah, my back hurts, and then okay, this is your problem. Fix your problem. you know, but keep addressing it. Well, you fix it, the pain goes away, and you just stop doing it altogether. You know, so that's CrossFitters for you. You know, shoulders.
That's athletes.
That's athletes, yeah, in general. But yeah.
Unless you're getting paid as an athlete
Yes,
to
you address
have
it every
somebody
single
do
day.
it for you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Because
mobility,
we like to maximize, or what we think is maximizing our time in the gym. So it's like, well, I want to get stronger, so I'm just going to focus on doing lifts. But it's like recovery, it's just as important as training. But
It's more important.
Yeah, we're just like, screw the recovery, like, let's just lift. Like, I want to get strong, let me just keep lifting.
Try and clean 300.
I'm going to lift myself into oblivion. Probably what I did to myself, because my back is injured right now. So I probably just lifted myself into oblivion, and now I have 12 weeks of just being sad. So.
That's what's wrong with him. That's why he has a sad face right now.
well, plus for most people, mobility is actually really boring. I, for one, have a home gym, and I actually have like a really small TV in there, but I have an Apple TV hooked up to it, so I can actually just watch stuff while I like
Big
phone
bunch
roll.
of this guy, huh?
It's not really. It's a really small TV, low quality. It looks like your phone if you just hold it up like this, but it's just far away.
Okay.
But if you have something to watch, it makes the time pass by. It's like if you're rowing, rowing like a 5K.
Yeah,
It's extremely
headphones or something
boring.
like that, yeah.
You don't listen to music at least, and it just lasts forever. Kind of feels like.
Right. That's everyone says that mobility sucks to do, and it's like, and then half the time is you doubt what's actually stiff. And this is one thing I was saying is about like the range of motion, like having a good evaluation of like what is tight. Okay, it's like everyone says, like, yeah, my hamstring is tight or my hip is tight. Like, is it tight?
Yeah, it's
let's
biased.
let's have a good solid foundation. So like, hey, I've actually lost range of motion here. And then you'd be like, oh, now I can spend 10 minutes, mobilize this joint, mobilize this tissue, and then you don't feel like you've wasted time.
You can always test and retest, right? You can
Absolutely.
Test
That's-
before you do the mobilization.
Absolutely.
Mobility work.
Because everyone's busy, and it's like if you just stretched your quad for 10 minutes and it didn't change the mobility of your quad, then you just wasted 10 minutes.
Yeah. Here's my question for you too, because from a coaching standpoint, you have people who have repetitive. Well, I lost my train of thought now. You have people who have repetitive problems, right? So for me, it's a low back issue. But how do I know, right, that it's muscular, or it's spinal? Like, how do I know if it's the actual injury or if it's something I just need to mobilize around?
That's tough. It's tough because a lot of times they're not mutually exclusive. So a lot of times, because you don't typically have a joint injury unless it was preceded by a muscular imbalance, unless you got hit by a train. Okay. And so 99, unless like we can have like some crazy genetic type malformations and stuff like that, but 99.9% of the time, your joint problem was predisposed to by a muscle imbalance. Okay, and then it's tough because, like I said, like a lot of times when we like, is it muscle, is it joint? A lot of times it's kind of both. Okay, and so.
And how do you determine that before seeing a specialist like yourself? How do we find out, or how do you know if you're in the middle of a workout and all of a sudden something feels funny? How do you know if it's muscular, or if it's like, oh, my spine's all of a sudden all whack?
It's tough. It's really tough. Typically, like an achiness or soreness or a dullness will probably be more muscle, whereas pinchy, sketchy, unstable will be more spinal in nature.
It's subjective, though,
Yeah,
right?
it's
tough.
like I said, a lot of times it's really tough. Location helps. A lot of times it's both.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's both.
Basically, a simple way how to tell it, well, in my mind, this should be muscular. If you've done 17-1, all those dumbbell snatches, then you'll know if it's a muscular lower back.
So if you're not sure, just go do 17 as fast as you can.
Yeah, just do that once in a lifetime, and then you can compare it to
Let's
that.
see if you can walk for the next 4 days.
Right.
Yeah.
Get up and down from your couch.
That's got to be the weirdest feeling I've had in my lower back ever in my life.
Mine was my erectors. It was more the meat of my back. Like, it wasn't the low back bending over. It was like that, just bringing my chest up. It hurt so bad.
I couldn't even stabilize.
It was hurt
like,
so bad.
I would laugh, and then my whole back would just like collapse.
Mine was just my lungs.
Yeah, you had pneumonia. And you still beat me. You still beat me at that week.
I slept for 6. I did that at work on a 10. And I slept for 6 hours.
Well, that's how you know you left it all out there.
I did. And I left it somewhere. Left it somewhere.
If we go back to muscle imbalances, let's take a quad muscle imbalance, for example. Like physically, one quad is larger than the other, just because maybe a injury actually happened to the one side, or maybe a surgery a long time ago. So physically, it is larger than the other side. A calf can also translate to this as well. How would you go by strengthening or just realigning the muscle imbalance?
This is one thing that drives me crazy about people who know they have muscle imbalances. Is like you have to do unbalanced training to fix a muscle imbalance. So for your example, like if you have one quad that's obviously stronger than the other one, you need to test it. So doing some like Bulgarian split squats to actually see if there is a strength imbalance. Because a lot of the time, if a muscle's bigger, it'll be stronger, but not necessarily. But 99.9% of the time it will be. So if you do, this is why we need to have a test. So let's test it. So if your split squat on one side is 165 and the split squat on the other side is 205, then absolutely you need to be doing some unilateral training to fix that imbalance. Same thing from front side to, and so just to throw out some quick numbers, like if you take 100% of your deadlift, 80% of that should be your back squat. Ish. And we can talk about levers and different things, but in the ballpark, 100% back, 100% deadlift, 80% should be your back squat, and then 68 to 70% of your deadlift should be your front squat. Now, if you have a huge disparity between those two, then you probably have some sort of muscular imbalance. Now, I would say when we talk about anterior structures, so your quad and your hip flexor, to posterior structures, glute and hamstring, in CrossFit and weightlifting in general, like the Olympic lifts, I do see very commonly that we're very strong anteriorly and we don't have a lot of hamstring and glute. Okay, and you can, a really simple test is just to look at yourself in the mirror and to see if your hamstring or your quad is bigger.
No, your dog, man. He farts. He stinks.
It's a good thing you're over there.
Sorry, man.
Yeah, and so you can just see if you were to split your leg in half, is it mostly quad, is it mostly hamstring? Okay, and a lot of times that'll correlate between the lifts that we see. Like if your back squat is actually 90% of your deadlift, or if your front squat's 80% of your deadlift, then you have a problem. You have some sort of muscular imbalance there for sure. Like I said, it's important to have these tests to see if it's actually true. Same thing with strength. So.
Yeah.
That is bad.
Yeah, I told you.
Pungent.
It's a good thing I'm not
I
over
can
there.
taste it.
If you can smell it, you can taste it.
Oh, God.
Couple last things. The last short thing for the muscle imbalance.
Yeah.
If you're training the muscle imbalance, would you only target that one specific side that is
Yeah, so,
possibly has the imbalance, or would you train both sides as well?
so for example, with your quad imbalance example, absolutely. So you'd be doing, like if your right quad was bigger and then it was weaker with the test of the split squat. So I like do like a 4 or a 5 rep on each side. That's pretty good. And try to work up to a maximum effort. And if you actually do find a pretty big disparity, then you're doing single leg on the left or whatever is weaker.
So targeting more of the weak side
Absolutely.
than the stronger side.
So
Absolutely.
you probably want to attack it like the same way you would if you tore your ACL on your left side, right?
For sure.
It's going to atrophy for a while, then you have to build that muscle back up. So same kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
What did you fart too? Last couple things. So we have how to avoid it, some of the form technique wise that we've already covered, how to treat it when it comes to muscle imbalances, things like that, and what can possibly cause it. If you have low back pain, or let's say if you had it, it was prominent back in the future. Back in the past.
Back in the future. Ironic thought.
That's a really weird sequel.
Yeah, it was,
Back in the
it's
future.
prominent in the past, but now it's not as apparent, or it's not relative anymore. Would you say, to go back into strength training and weightlifting, when would you say was the kind of perfect amount of time to actually transition back into a weightlifting program?
After an injury?
Yeah, after an injury, after you had low back pain and it was severely affecting you.
Don't answer this question.
That's really tough. and a good coach will always say it depends, because it absolutely depends. And if you just strained your QL, I mean, you could be back weightlifting the next day, depending on how bad the strain is. But if you blew a disc in your low back and you needed to get that disc resected surgically, I mean, then you're talking 12, 14, 16 weeks. I mean, so it really depends on, one, the diagnosis and the severity of the injury, and then the work, like the volume of work that athlete has done in the past. Okay, and so it really depends, because I've had people that have had low back injury and they're low back injury and they're in the next day squatting. And I've also had people who had a low back injury and they've been out for 3 months. It really depends. So
It's subjective, right? I don't know he's doing it, but
I don't know. Yeah.
let's close this thing out, Paul.
So today we talked about low back pain, what can cause it, how to avoid it, treat it, and a little bit about muscle imbalance as well. So today was episode 18. Next week we'll hit you with another episode with different topics. Episode 19 coming at you next week on Power Up Podcast. Remember, you can always find us on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, CrossFit Mob, for the video version. And also you can find us on iTunes and podcast.com.
and you can find us at metaryhealth.com, and I'm on all the social medias at Paul Endress, Dr. Endress. Or just stop in at Mob. Come train with us.
There you go.
And Endress is ENDRISS.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you, this doctor makes some pretty mad food as well.
Chef Wars to be continued.
Yeah.
I make a mean omelet. That's all I'm good at. Breakfast. I do breakfast only.
Omelets and the grill.
We'll see you next week
I'm
on
a
Power Up
awesome.
Podcast. Thank you for listening.
So I hear all the time from people that they say that their hamstrings are tight. And I'm always like, are they really? What is tight? And so if we don't have a loss of range of motion of your hamstring isn't tight. If I take any muscle to its end range of motion, it's going to feel tight. So we need to have an evaluation to see, do I actually have a loss of range of motion in my hamstring? So here's the evaluation. So lay down next to the rig with your hip crease right at the angle of the rig. So just like this. What you're going to do with your hip right at the angle of the rig, can you get your toe past the rig? Okay. And so here my right hamstring is not tight. It feels tight, but I have enough range of motion there in my hamstring. Same thing on the other side. So my left one, as I go up, there I'm reaching the angle of the rig. Now if I do this test and my hamstring comes to here, then yes, you're right. I do actually have a tight hamstring, so we need to do some mobility work on the hamstring. Calf stretch is an excellent stretch if your hip flexors and quads are tight. And a couple things we want to mention during couch stretch. So in this position here, if you want to come to the side, as you can see, my low back is in a whole lot of extension. I'm not actually getting extension out of my hip. What I want to do is squeeze my butt cheek so that I flatten out my low back. And now I'm getting extension out of my hip and not my low back. So here you can see that I'm extended up my low back. This is not what we want. We want to get extension out of my hip. So if I can squeeze my butt cheek, now I'm getting extension out of my hip and not my low back. Right, so if your low back has a stability issue or you're losing some core function, one of my favorite exercises for that is dead bug. So dead bug is here. And a couple things when we talk about this. What I want to try to do is keep my low back flat against the ground and not extended like this. Okay? See how I'm breaking here at the rib cage, my low back's coming off the ground. So what I want to do is keep my low back flat against the ground and try to breathe through my belly. You can kind of see there. breathing deep into my belly. You should be able to hold this position for 3 minutes.